Welcome to Tech Insights, the podcast for Tech Titans. I'm Amy Alexander. I do communications for Tech Titans, and today we're talking to Calvin Carter, the president CEO of Bottle Rocket. They're heavy into software. We don't actually talk software, we talk leadership, because Calvin really has some, what I think is out of the box thinking about how he leads his organization. His people love him. I was fascinated and thrilled with how he chooses to lead his organization. I felt like I was sitting at the feet of a guru. I hope you enjoy about a 40-minute conversation that we have. Calvin has a lot of energy, and I am sure that you'll be able to use it no matter what kind of leader you are in your organization. Let's listen in. So here we are at the Tech Insights podcast, and I am here with Calvin Carter, who is CEO and president, I'm assuming, of Bottle Rocket. Thank you so much for joining us. So what are you up to these days? Actually, I mean, what is the unusual thing about working from home?
Well, I think the big news is, our announcement of what we call work from wherever. That's the exciting thing that's going on in our lives. There's lots of stuff about work from home I can talk about, including how it reminded me how important it is to have an ergonomic office chair at your house for these.
I bought a new one
for these occasions. But really, the work from wherever was something that, or is something that is really going to define our business, its culture, how we engage, the work we do, the quality of our work, et cetera. It's going to impact that for years and potentially decades to come. So we moved, we jumped, really completely committed to this new way of working. And we're excited about it because it really, it lives into something that we already believed, which was that the work was the most important thing. There's so many little things inside of our business and culture and everything, which focuses on the work. Like, for example, we when we recruit people, we filter out people with extremely strong egos because they make it about them and not the work. We have a very flat organization because, so you're less worried about the hierarchy and you're more interested in the work. We invite employees that even if they've only worked here a day to, challenge anything, point things out that we could have done better, et cetera. Why? Because, again, it's all about the work. It's coming up with the best ideas and the best execution and constantly optimizing. And when you say work from wherever is a very dismissive term. It's like whatevs. It's just a very, very dismissive term, which implies that something else must be more important if it's saying I'm not important. So the other word in that work from wherever is work. So it very clearly says, it doesn't say work from home, because I think work from home is a very COVID thing. We won't be like quarantining ourselves in our homes forever. So working from home, which is what Twitter announced, and I believe Facebook as well, which is great. I'm not digging on those two amazing companies, but I do think it's a bit more short-sighted. And what the vision we're casting is something that will make sense for many, many years, not just the year 2020. Now, this puts a lot of pressure on the workforce to really show up and continue to kind of earn that autonomy. If you're a person who is irresponsible and you take advantage, well, you're probably not going to work out in these new cultures where before maybe you were able to get away with it, because this new way of working requires you to be responsible and take care of your own decisions and make sure you're taking care of all the work on your desk. Versus, I'm a big fan of autonomy. I would rather be the person that trusts you too much and maybe gets taken advantage of than the person who doesn't trust anyone because they never want to be in a situation where they got taken advantage of. So when you come from a centering of trust versus distrust, you naturally want to provide other people the opportunity to have autonomy, more responsibility, more independence. And so that then bleeds into all your decisions. So let's take the Bottle Rocket vacation plan. Long time ago, we were just like every other company out there where we would count the number of hours you worked and converted that into a number of hours of paid time off, and you know, wrote it on your pay slip, and let you go negative by a certain amount, and then you lost the time at the end of the year if you didn't use it. Just the normal stuff that 99% of working Americans deal with in terms of having paid time off plans, if they have a paid time off plan. We just said, why do we need all that? And so all the questions were because we're out of like not trusting. Well, you really can't trust people to, make their own decisions about vacation, and they'll all take advantage of you and da 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 da. And I was like, yeah, but what's I still don't see the benefit. I just don't see the benefit. It seems like a lot of work. It's a lot of anxiety. It actually hurts some businesses that end up having very low revenue in the month of December, because all of their billable employees are taking the time off that they weren't able to take off before. So we went to what we call a self-managed vacation plan, which means it's your responsibility to determine a time that makes sense for both you and your team around you who relies on you, the right time to take off and how long to take off. And so it's not the person going to their manager and saying, hey, can I have Friday off? And that manager has no idea that level of detail. If them being gone on Friday is going to cause problems elsewhere in the project team. So now the person goes to the project team, goes to their peers and says, hey, I'd like to take Friday off. Is that going to be a problem? And then there's a discussion. Well, actually, that's the day we're launching the new version of the software, and we really need you. Or any chance you could do it next week? If not, maybe we can have Joe fill in for you. But you got to, cross-train Joe between now and Friday. It really puts the burden back on the person. But we only hire adults, and we need to treat these adults like adults. And that theme of autonomy, if you really, really lean into it, is really powerful, because now you're an employer that trusts their employees. You're an employer who respects your employees, because you can't, trust someone without respecting them. And now you have an opportunity to have a much deeper relationship with that employee, to the point where, they'll walk through walls for the organization because they feel that the organization values them, that they matter to the organization. And at the end of the day, our short amount of time on this little blue planet, it's really all about mattering, making a difference. Doesn't that be huge? Steve Jobs says, I just want to put a ding or a dent in the universe. So the idea of making that impact is super important, and mattering is super important. So leaders need to start treating people like they do matter. If they want that person to feel great about themselves, extend themselves, develop themselves, take risks, innovate within the organization, and help lead the organization, you have to start with realizing that person matters a lot. And if they're not getting it done, it's probably because of you, not them.
I think no one would ask for a coronavirus pandemic. However, I mean, as someone who looks at the glass half full and what are the opportunities, I
Yeah.
mean, you've only talked about one thus far, and that's your
Work from
work
wherever.
from everywhere. Is there any other areas, or you may not be talking yet, but I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. No one wants this pandemic, but the one thing that is interesting about the pandemic is I think of it more as an accelerator of existing trends. So for decades now, let's continue with this work from wherever, as an example. Um, you know, what's the old saying in real estate, especially retail? Location, 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 right? Well, if having a great location was the secret to being successful at retail, Amazon would never have been successful.
Mhm.
So the things change over time. At one point in time, when we all drove to stores, location was, absolutely vital to the success of your business. But when the store starts to drive to you, the location of that store really doesn't matter. Your location and where you need to be to get the things done in your life becomes much more important. And that's a trend that's been going on for a long time. So when we say work from wherever, we're saying the sense of place is less important than the work. It's less important how and where you get the work done versus the quality of the work and the impact the work is going to have in the world. We just think that the pandemic has dramatically accelerated, I think, 3 to 5 years. But let's just take digital as another example. We're seeing, we've all seen trends of people buying things online or ordering their food, through an app. Those things have been going on well before COVID. But now COVID forced everyone to, at least during this time of quarantine, to start to use digital tools because it was one of the only ways you could get food. And it was one of the only safe ways that you can, conduct business with all the brands in your life. So now many more people have a taste for what it's like to order their groceries through an app versus to, go to a store and walk around and collect all the stuff yourself. And so now in the future, when it's time to grocery shop, I'm not saying that everyone's gonna do it online, but more people will do it online, or they'll do at least some of it online, where before they were doing none of it. So it used to be a very big divide between those that were connected customers and those that were disconnected customers. Well, disconnected customers had to connect to survive. And so now they have that experience of a connected customer. And so we're seeing percentage of revenue of our clients that are being conducted through apps and websites doubling and tripling, which would take probably at least 5 years to have taken place, but it took place in 5 days.
So what are you looking forward to doing once they, release us to let us go do whatever? What is the number one thing you're looking forward to doing?
That's a really good question. Your question is actually very telling because, I think there's two general schools of thought about this whole pandemic. One is, how long is it going to last so I know when we can get back to how we used to do things? And then there's another way to look at it, which is there might be better ways to do, what we're doing now. So I actually don't want myself or, the people in my life, my family, my business, to go back to doing things the way we did before. That might be the safe route, but one, it's not the best route. The best route is to challenge everything and optimize constantly, everything. And it leans into a future. And I'd rather be someone who is relevant in the future than someone who was relevant in the past. And one of the reasons why, because I have a lot of people ask me, why did we announce work from wherever when we are kind of, quote unquote, in the middle of this? And why didn't we wait until the end of the year or at least the end of the summer? And I said, because I know we're going to go there anyways. So why not be the first to get there? Mm-hmm. And be able to enjoy the benefit of being thought of as an innovative, forward-thinking organization, because that's going to connect us to other forward-thinking organizations that would like to do business with us. We've already had a lot of companies, clients of ours, call us saying, we read about this in the news, and I thought the next thing they were going to say was, and we're worried about are we never going to have meetings again or something like that? And the rest of the sentence sounded more like, and we want to know what you're thinking because we're looking for new ways of doing things, because we don't think we're going to go back 100% to the old way. There's going to be some combination of new way, old way. Let's just talk about movie theaters. For decades, we've been talking about first run movies being available outside of the cinema. Now, that was the only choice, during this time. And so I think we're going to see more, first releases to streaming. And of course, how do you pay for that? How much do you pay for that? Do the actors still get paid, fairly? All that stuff works its way out. But we don't usually come back from major disruptions. We usually go deeper into it. Another example would be, for how many years did people naysay that, digital downloads of music was never going to take off? It'd be like, oh, well, all these cars have cassette players and CD players in them, and everyone already owns a CD player. No one's going to go out and buy a music playing device called an iPod. And by the way, when you get much better quality and higher bit rate of music, from a CD than you do from a streaming. So all these reasons, right? Well, at the end of the day, convenience was king. And people went and did the thing that was most convenient for them, which is clearly, the iPod digital music download type of way of getting music. And so I think coming out of this pandemic, there'll be some things that we did in the pandemic that we had to do, but then we determined, wow, that was really convenient. Ordering those groceries saved me an hour this week. Doesn't mean you're going to grocery shop every time online. I mean, I still like to walk through the aisles of a grocery store from time to time, but not every day, and maybe not even every week. So we just essentially exposed ourselves to all new ways of doing the stuff we used to do. And some of the ways we're doing things now, we're gonna want to continue to do them. So I'm staying very open-minded, and I'm like actually kind of forcing a bit of discipline on myself to not go back and do things the way we did them before. Because when you're open to new things, now there's a clearing in your life where something new can come into it. But if you're just like jonesing for what you had last month, you're not open to new things, and you will miss something that would have been better because you were so stuck in wanting to get back to the past.
So the quick questions are, all right, what app does Bottle Rocket do that I might have on my phone?
So first off, it's difficult for me to answer these questions because I believe that all my babies are beautiful, but there are some that are, just wildly popular and have, tens and tens of millions of downloads. So the Southwest Airlines app obviously is one of those that is pretty prevalent. Before Starwood became Marriott, it was called the SPG app, and we did all the keyless entry and all that type of fun stuff. If you are a fan of Chick-fil-A, well, then you're using apps that we built for them. And if you stay at a Hyatt or other hotels, we've done that work too. And NPR, it was our very first customer that we had in first years of starting the business. They're still a customer. And so if you use NPR products, they've built some internally and we've built some for them. But you're probably using some component or an entire app that was built by Bottle Rocket. So it's been really fun to been able to be part of all these different organizations over time. If you've watched TV on your iPad or something, there's a high likelihood that broadcaster hired Bottle Rocket to build those apps. But get this, our company is a pretty small business. We've launched over 450 like meaningful digital experiences, not 450 projects in our life, but 450 distinct products. And that's a lot of work for a small organization to do. And the cool thing is we were doing some like math on it one time, and we were having a real hard time figuring out how many people our work has touched, because the numbers are just crazy. And when you start putting them all together, you start to get into like, nearly 1 billion people, and you're like, that can't be right. That's impossible. So we usually don't try to say the big numbers, because we really don't know. We know it's at least hundreds of millions, and we think it's actually much higher than that.
That's really great. Is there any particular technology that you're kind of pride yourself on saying we got there first, or we did it best, or, this is, I'm going to give you a chance to sit there and say, we are amazing in this particular instance. Now, I suddenly got this impression like I was giving you a job interview. So I'm sorry, but if this feels like a job interview, give me an example of when you were amazing.
Well, if it's a job interview, how am I doing?
You're doing great.
Well, I think, one of the things we've had a lot of firsts at Bottle Rocket, and that's been a lot of fun. One of the ones that really stands out is keyless entry. So as we all know now, not every hotelier and not every location, but a lot of them are now support keyless entry, where you can essentially use your iPhone or your Android phone. You walk into a hotel, you're given your hotel room number without having to stand in line. You don't need a key. You just walk straight to your hotel room. You hold your phone up to the door, and the door opens. That's called keyless entry. Well, Bottle Rocket, in partnership with Starwood and also Ablo, were the first ones to bring, which is the hardware company, first ones to bring keyless entry to market. We beat every other hotelier to the punch, which means we were able to get our client all of the press. And so while my clients' competitors came out with keyless maybe a year later or whatever, by then it's not press worthy, it's not noteworthy. So that's part of the power of going first. Is I tell my clients, like, if you know you're eventually going to go there, then why not go there now and get credit for having gone there first and become known for having gotten there first. And that's essentially the concept of innovation. And so we've been able to, we've really enjoyed a lot of relationships with companies that they were willing to go first. And going first is a very big deal to a Rocketeer. Part of our narrative of why we exist and what we do and how we do what we do is around going first. Because when you think of going first, it's very exciting, but it's also unbelievably terrifying. And fear of failure is, probably one of the number one, if not the most scary thing to a human, is failing, because failing can lead to embarrassment. Embarrassment can lead to shame, and shame is a terrible dark hole for any human to get into. But when you kind of free yourself of that stuff and you go out of your way to find things that you don't know how to do or haven't been invented yet, or no one's done it yet, and you're not just doing something someone else done. When you go out of your way to do that, you slowly work down your fear of failure. You'll always have a fear of failure, but you acclimate to it to the point that you build up a bit of a resistance to it. And then when you really are up against, really tough deadlines or technology issues or brand problems or whatnot, you're able to, keep your head and push through it for your client. So that going first has not just helped our business, it's helped our clients' business, and it's helped them to be able to get things done where they maybe would not have done it without a partner like Bottle Rocket.
I don't know why it made me think of this, but you talked about your parents, yeah, and how they presented you that entrepreneurial spirit. And I heard your presentation to our board when you did that, and I had someone comment, and he goes, most entrepreneurs, I have problems with that word, um, their kids actually don't want to go in the business because they see how hard their parents work. And they're like, I don't ever want to do that. And I did see that you have at least some little ones. How do you communicate? I mean, how do you train them? And what are you training them to do and be? And are they learning entrepreneur kind of things? And, how does that translate to a younger generation?
Yeah, I think in terms of teaching my children, independence and a sense of self, and confidence is very important, which means you have to feel good about yourself. If you don't have, if you're lacking self-esteem, it's really hard to be a self-starter and independent because you question everything you do. Well, I'm not good enough, and so whatever decision I make is not going to be the right decision, and then you usually end up paralyzing yourself. And so, feeling good about yourself, feeling that you're capable. I've got twin 11-year-old daughters. I am all the time telling them, especially because they're up against the guys in all the things that they're going to compete to win throughout their life, jobs, places in school, places on sports teams, etc. And I'm always reminding them, I was like, hey, listen, your ability to get something done comes from you. Everything that happens in your life comes from you. So start to think about what you want to achieve and where you want to go in life, and realize that it's in you. And don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do it, you're not fast enough, you're not smart enough, you didn't go to good enough college, all that type of stuff. It's really BS. What's really the most important thing is, what do you feel about yourself? The other thing about being an entrepreneur is I think a good entrepreneur is a highly empathetic person. Empathy is super important. And we all know that children develop that part of the brain later in life. And so when you start early on, just being aware of your surroundings, because how many times have you said to the kid, hey, could you go pick up my car keys? And they walk right up to it and they don't see it. You're like, their car keys aren't here, Dad. They're like, actually, they're right in front of you. There's a situational awareness deficit. And that's part of the empathy, being able to sense the world around you, whether it's people, places, or things, and then determine what's my impact on those things around me. And so all the time we're asking questions about, like, well, did you ask them how they felt? When you communicate that, when you said that to your friend, what do you think they felt? Oh, that's interesting. How would you feel if I said that to you? So it really makes them start to think like, wow, I'm not the only person in the world. There's other people out there. And I think great leaders are people who can connect with other people through sensing and understanding what it's like to be that person. Many times when I'm talking to somebody, I'm thinking less about the next thing I'm going to say and more about, I wonder how that landed with this person. I have a sense that it's not landing right. So I'm going to take more time here to explain it. Versus the opposite, which is being egotistical and saying, well, I'm a great communicator, so I must have communicated. If you didn't understand it, that's your problem. And moving on. It's more work to be empathetic. But I do think it's super, super, super important to being a good entrepreneur in your life, a good leader, whether you're an entrepreneur or not.
How does connected employees happen and do well? And
yeah, so we talk about the connected customer, or connected consumer, but there's also the connected employee, and with connected employee, it's yes, that there's some technology involved and the ability to work from wherever you want to work and just be just as productive if you're working next to the person. But connected employee, I think, goes deeper because there has to be an emotional connection between the employee and the employer. In the ways we build emotional connections to individual humans to groups of humans is usually by a sense of shared purpose and a sense of shared values. So you might have picked your religion, which is an organization, a collection of other humans. You may have picked where you work. You may have picked your favorite charity. You may have picked your neighborhood, et cetera, based on resonating with the ideals or the values and purpose of that organization. Unfortunately, not everyone thinks that way about their work. They might think it about the clubs they're part of and the friends they hold, maybe where they live, or what religion or other organizations and volunteer opportunities they do in their life. But then they think, very, very unfortunately, yeah, but my job is just a job. I just work to make enough money to do the things I want to do in life. And I look at the other way. I'm like, wait, we spend way too much time away from our friends and families and hobbies and interests to not love what we do. Everyone deserves to love what they do. And that's a hard thing for a lot of people to realize. But a truly connected employee is someone who has a bigger purpose for working at that company than just the paycheck, than just the normal exchange of value. It's something bigger and potentially more important than that. Everyone has to receive a fair compensation because you can't be great at work if you're worried about bill collectors catching you on the way home. But when you check that box, you then give the employee the opportunity to tie into your purpose, to take on that autonomy, to repay that trust back to the organization, and that starts to build culture. And you may have heard me before say, and it's not my quote, it's someone else's quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's my way of saying the best business idea and strategy in the world cannot succeed if there is a toxic culture at the heart of the organization, or cannot succeed in the long term. It might work for a year or two, but eventually, toxic cultures destroy organizations from the inside out.
How do you encourage other people to give you feedback and not just create an echo chamber of basically having them tell you what they know that you want to hear?
Well, one of the most important things is realizing that you're training your environment at all times. My wife is very much into horseback riding, and I said to her one time, hey, can I just ride your horse for a little bit? And she's like, actually, no, because every time someone gets on that horse, it thinks it's being trained. And so if you use the wrong cues and signals, because she's super advanced in this sport, then my horse is going to think oh, that's the way I'm supposed to act. And the same thing is true about everyone around you. Whether you mean to it or not, everything you say and everything you do and just kind of how you show up is training them. So if you don't want an echo chamber, don't punish people for dissenting. Don't say things like, well, who are you? You just started working here. Well, you're not even a manager. Don't say dismissive things like that, or you will get an echo chamber. The other thing is dissension, and I don't mean like insubordination, but I just mean someone who has a different point of view, and it's worth voicing it. The interesting thing about that is it's really uncomfortable. It's annoying as heck to have someone take an issue with something you've said or you've done. So another thing, in addition to knowing you're always training your environment, is to actually stop and center yourself before reacting. In fact, I think leaders should delay reacting Instead, they should replace a reaction, which is a defensive mechanism. Well, you don't know all the information, or da 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 da, or you don't know what you're talking about. Replace that with just more listening. And it's super easy to do. It's just hard to remember to do it in the moment. So, for example, I might say something like, huh, well, I didn't see that coming. Tell me more about that. Or that's really interesting. Why do you feel that way?
Mhm.
Or what were you, what data were you using when you came to that determination? And so now you're showing an interest in learning more from them versus shutting them down. Because a lot of times the leader will just be like, great suggestion, I'll take it into consideration, see you later. And they just walk out the door. That's the same thing as saying, why are you opening your mouth? And that's how you get an echo chamber.
Now, your history, and I may be misremembering this, but you've always been an entrepreneur, right? So this has been, and you kind of got into the bottle rocket thing was '08 or something. You might
2008, yeah.
you can correct me on that. Where did you learn leadership? I mean, were you the two guys in the side, or did you have great leaders, or have you had to particularly go seek out good leadership examples and training and surround yourself with good people? What does that look like?
Sure. So I've only actually held one, legitimate job my entire life, and that was for a year and a half working for Price Waterhouse. Other than that, I have, worked for myself, worked for the businesses that I started. And I started doing this when I was very, very young. And I think the reason I did that was because both my mother and my father are entrepreneurs. They owned and ran their own business. And so when growing up around just talking around the dinner table, the conversations that happened in my house were maybe a little bit different than the conversations that were happening every other house. So I thought it was totally normal what I was doing. So I just kind of assumed, oh, everyone, owns their own business, and everyone, has all these things. And you questions about, where are we gonna find investment, and how are we gonna, take care of the staff, and all these sorts of heavy responsibility oriented questions and conversations were happening since I was, you know, just born. So for me, I was very fortunate in that when it was time for me to have a chance to start my own business, I already had like a built-in level of confidence in going your own way, because that's all I knew. I do think that gives me an advantage in taking on new challenges, because I'm really not that concerned about the downside. I just get super excited about the upside. And an entrepreneur needs to be, you need to have the downside in mind, but you really need to focus more on the upside.
I think that's great, and I'll probably wrap it up there unless there's any parting shots you want to do.
No, I guess depending on who's listening, remember that whether whether you run an organization or you just run your own career, you're a leader. Think about your constituents, think about your stakeholders. Um, Realize that the best way for you to get what you want out of them is for you to help them get what they want out of you. Being empathetic, hiring people with very high EQs, associating yourself with people that are empathetic, that truly believe in the value of a fellow human being. That's really where work actually becomes very exciting. All the stuff I just said was very kind of like touchy feely personal stuff. But when you bring that type of stuff into your career, that's when your career gets extremely rewarding and you do have the chance to do the best work of your life.
Yep, perfect. Thank you. As always, Calvin. Yay!
Thank
Appreciate
you. I
it.
appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody.
Sure.